On August 29, 2005, the worst hurricane to hit the United States slammed into one of the most vulnerable areas of the country. Hurricane Katrina was the most expensive and one of the most deadly natural disasters to hit the United States. Some 1,500 people were estimated to have died, and 134 were still missing 2 years after the storm. While the storm was a Category 4, it would have been much less devastating had it hit another community. Disaster managers had long warned that a major hurricane making landfall in New Orleans could result in massive flooding and several thousand deaths. Not only was much of the city built below sea level, but the network of private and public levees that protected the city from flooding were poorly maintained. When the storm strengthened to a Category 4, residents were ordered to evacuate, but poorer residents either did not receive notice or simply could not evacuate. As the storm pushed inland, it was increasingly clear that government officials and agencies were failing to coordinate their messages and their resources.
New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin, Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco, and President George W. Bush appeared unprepared, unaware, uninformed, and willing to shift blame for a failure in response. The day before the storm hit, Governor Blanco told the media, "I believe we are prepared. That's the one thing I've always been able to brag about." Then the very next day, she issued a formal disaster declaration indicating that the hurricane was beyond the ability of the state government to manage and requested federal disaster aid. President Bush was reportedly unaware of the disaster unfolding in New Orleans. He was vacationing in Texas at the time the storm hit. On September 2nd, President Bush visited Alabama and publicly praised FEMA director for handling the crisis, but was completely unaware that thousands of people were stranded. The disaster evolved slowly, and the devastation was not clear until the second and third days of the event. Eventually, there were over 50 breaches and levees, and 80% of New Orleans was flooded, with some parts under 15 feet of water.
Although there were a lot of things done wrong in handling the crisis, there were a few things done right. One leader involved in managing the disaster was New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin. Mayor Nagin issued an advisory encouraging residents to watch the storm's path and prepare for possible evacuation. When it became clear that the city was a likely target of a massive storm, Mayor Nagin issued a mandatory evacuation with fewer than 24 hours before Hurricane Katrina would make landfall. Even with 24 hours notice, almost 90% of the residents evacuated. This was a very high rate, as 100% evacuation of a major city is almost impossible. What should have been done differently? We believe many things should have been done differently when handling this crisis. The levees that were poorly maintained should have been inspected long before a crisis could have occurred. Also, there was obviously no crisis plan in place. Government officials and agencies treated this hurricane like every other hurricane and were not prepared for a disaster of this magnitude. The leaders should have created a sense of urgency among the public and prepared for the worst. The mayor was more concerned with the economy of the city rather than the residents of New Orleans. Governor Blanco pointed fingers at the Bush administration for not taking over the crisis, and President Bush was non-existent during the crisis. With the same message, communication among the three leaders, and concern for the public, this crisis could have been handled quicker and more effectively.